All right, so welcome to part 3. In this video, we're going to be finishing up the topology of the mesh. I really get into the details here. I pretty much don't leave out a single step. And so if you're looking for that, you're looking for knowing exactly what someone did to finish something, not just seeing the final product. That's what this video is for. I got a new mic partway through, and I'm improving my setup for YouTube as we go. So most of this video is shot with a much worse mic, and then at about 30 minutes, I get the new mic, and so I'll put a little intermission in there to let you know when I'm switching. And otherwise, yeah, thanks for checking this out. We'll bring this into Blender at the end and render it out.
I'm starting with this line here that creates a nice shape in the light, and I'm working with the bottom edge of it in sub D mode with a new surface. I'm just going to shape it to where it belongs. Nice and squared off, and adding an edge loop here to make this a little sharper. Check it out from all different angles. I need to add another edge loop here. Didn't change our mesh too badly, but I'm softening it down, keeping this consistent all the way down. These consistent panel gaps will really help give us a feeling of quality in the final model. This would have a thickness and come down, so I can extrude this, connect these, connect this as well. Extrude this, bring it down to this point, connect these. And then I'm going to add an edge loop all the way down across. It goes right where I want it to, all the way down to this edge here. So we can connect this to give this a thickness. Repeat that all the way down. This got rounded out, so I'm going to add another supporting edge loop here, tighten it up. I'm barely using my line, so I can just turn this off. Now we can come fix this panel gap here. Add in a supporting edge loop and another one. Thickening this side out. These lights are a highlight of the car, so let's try to capture the complexity of them and actually build in all of these little design lines they have. Creating this seam that I see in the reference. If I look really close, I can see this rotates out and then just twists in. I'm not getting this totally perfect, but this extra attention to detail and the lights is really going to help the car. I'm noticing this whole section actually comes out underneath here. See if I can do it just by pulling these. We just need to smooth out these upper polygons. So with them both selected, I'm using the right analog stick up and down to smooth it out. Down smooths it. Extrude that whole bottom section down, and now I'm just connecting it again. Sometimes you can connect 2 points at once if you line it up just right. All right, looking at that on the other side with mirror. Now I'm going to go into surface, point mode, create a surface that comes down this way, duplicate it a few times, send it backwards, and let go. Make it sub D, grab the entire thing in face mode, extrude and make it a little bit bigger and push it away from the center. So you've got volume all the way across. It's a pretty cool trick. We can delete this edge loop to make it a little faster to extrude across. Turn off edge select mode, multi-select, grab, connect to the other side. Just do that all the way down. Now you can do both at once. Okay, that's pretty much the shape we were looking for. Now let's just add some supporting edge loops. Here, here, and down the edges. I'm going to duplicate that and just shrink it down a little bit inside itself. And the reference is like a crystal kind of piece with some interior elements. And so if we throw some glass shaders on these with overlapping complexity, it's going to look really cool in a 3D engine somewhere else. Duplicate this one more time. Now I want to make this one big triangular piece. In edit mode, I'm just going to grab these points, pull them all the way out, kind of fill that area there. Just going to angle the whole thing a little bit more. Now let's make a back scoop for the light. With the surface tool in point mode, click, wider, click again, wider, click again, wider, pull up, click again, and then pull all the way in. Now we can edit it. Just make sure it's filling the whole area. Those are the main design elements. I want to make sure to just make it easier on myself later by throwing a white glass material shader on them now. So I'm going to grab, make them white, and just make sure I use the same material on both. So it'll be easier to select that once I'm in Blender or whatever I'm going to use. This is a shiny metal black backing. So I'm just going to make a new material and make sure that it's reflective. Let's make the bulbs that are inside. Looks like each bulb has sort of a little housing that it sits in. It's shaped something like this. It'd be really nice if I could just add thickness to the surface in Gravity Sketch. That's a feature that I would really highly request. What I'll do instead is I'll grab this, edit it, go into subdivision surface, then go into face mode, grab the whole thing, duplicate it, and scale it out, and let go. But you can see it didn't fill in the interior part, making this whole thing bigger. For the shape of the bulb on the inside, I'm going to go to the volume tool, go to really, really small brush to make it angular, and then just kind of start in the center here, and then push it back to give it that low poly, angular, light catching effect. Now we can edit that, and it's a pretty complex shape. So I'm just going to reduce. Let's do a simplify points. Continue removing unnecessary points. Just taking out large clusters. I'm going to duplicate this a couple of times, so I want to make sure it's not too complicated. You want this light catching, kind of sharp angularity in there. It's not bad. Let's add all of this to that black surface material we had. Make this a group so it's easy to grab. And I'm going to duplicate this and put it over here. Turn it, ungroup it, take out the second piece, edit this, bring these points up. Now we're going to add an extra edge loop, push that back. Then we can just edit this light, pull it into place. So just to continue adding to that complexity, I'm going to duplicate this and push it back here. I got rid of the duplicate housing that I made, and I'm just pushing the sidewalls back. I'm going to grab and duplicate both of these, shrink it down, put it somewhere over here. Just bringing points in those bulbs forward to add angularity. You can overlap them. Okay, I'm going to call that not bad. Let's edit these and push them back a little bit to give us some room for some glass, which we'll put over the top of this entire thing. Okay, now I'm just adding some glass to cover this. I'm going to go into subdivision mode and completely cover these blacked out. Now, if you want to be able to see them as glass in Gravity Sketch, just add them to a new layer with transparency, which I'll do right after. And remember that real glass has thickness, so if you're in Blender and you're trying to make nice looking glass, you're going to want to add that thickness in as like a solidify modifier on top of that particular piece of geometry to give it the real feel of glass. That'll have an impact on the way it refracts. Okay, now just adding supporting edge loops around all of the sides and checking out how that lines up with the panels. And now we're going to grab the whole thing, go into face mode, and extrude, and move forward a little bit. And that basically gives us thickness all the way around that we can push in. We'd still want to make sure that we use a solidify modifier if we're doing a full-on ray tracing render of this. Now to ensure we can see all the hard work we did on the lights, let's take this and go into our layers and make a new layer, call it glass, put this on it, and make it transparent. In this case, I made it barely transparent. Now let's move on to the lower grill below the light. In surface mode, let's just fill in this whole inside edge here, triple clicking in the sharp areas. And I believe we can loop that, make some adjustments, convert to sub D, go into face mode, grab the whole thing, duplicate it, and scale it. Let's see, do we want to go out or in? Scale it in. Just check everything, all four corners before you let go with your hand. It does kind of take some practice to get this right. There we go. Edge select mode. Grabbing this whole edge loop, duplicating it again, and just dragging it back. I'm just pushing and pulling so it overlaps with the geometry. That took a fair amount of adjusting, but that's the general idea. Now I'm going to edit this and flatten in the interior section. This doesn't need to go back so far, so I'm just bringing it in. Back to the surface tool, drawing that interior element. Convert it to poly, delete these. So it's just two. Then we can extrude this back. Let's get it lined up the way we want first. We can extrude the entire thing. I think it comes out wide at the top actually, and it gets sharp here. Okay, now let's grab the whole thing, delete these, we don't need them. We're gonna go into face mode, grab all of it, duplicate, and move it back. Actually move it forward so you get the thickness. We can position it. Do some editing to make it look more correct. Got a little funky. Add an edge loop here and edge loop here to maintain the volume. All right, now let's push it into place, make it a little bigger as needed. Just duplicate that and drag it over where the other one would go. And then we can edit it like the other one is. There, each one is a bit different. Pushing them back a little bit. I'm just going to make a surface here to fill some darkness in. So now let's look at this mesh here. We want it to be a hexagonal mesh. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn the grid density up and create my hexagon. So that's going to be, it's a little hard to see these grid points. I'm going to zoom in. I'm in point mode here and you can see it snapping. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, complete. And then we can loop that. I'm going to go to edit mode and just add points Get the shape I want. I can turn grid off now, edit this, push these out a bit in X to make it more similar to what's in the reference. Okay, so that's pretty big. So make sure I have grid mode on. So when I make it smaller, it stays snapped. So a few things. When we make this pattern, we can't simply duplicate it like this, because if we duplicate it horizontally, we get squares in the center. And there aren't any squares in the reference, it's just hexagons on hexagons. So when we duplicate it up, we want to also bring it over here and then bring it down. So that way we have repeating hexagons when we duplicate this upwards and to the side. So to show what that looks like, if I duplicate to the side, you get that there. And then if I duplicate it vertically, it fits nicely into itself. And backing out here, I'm going to turn mirror on, and we have to consider how it looks in the center line as well, because if we just touch them and then duplicate it, then we're going to get the square. So let's duplicate this out, move it up, and move it over. Just get these things lined up and make sure you're staying on axes move. Okay, so for the centerpiece here, I'm editing it, and I'm just going to get rid of the points on one side and then turn off loop. And these points here are acting all weird because there's 2 in each spot for grid mode, which is keeping the volume on this one, but I don't want that here, so I'm going to simplify points. And then I can go back and add in the supporting edge loops again. And then I'm just going to extrude this while in axes move and snap them here. Okay, so to get this just right, I'm going to draw a curve that goes along the angle of the mesh that I want. So I'm going to group this, and then I'm going to go into my movement tools, which are in the tool belt. I'm going to grab this, and then I'm going to tap here and go to the right to rotate more precisely. I'm going to duplicate this and move it up, and that's actually still fine, so I'll do it again. And right about here, I'll start to curve it. So I'm going to click on this object, go to the right and click, and I can rotate it only along one axis at a time. So I just need a little bit of rotation there, and then I'll move it down. Now we can just move this into place. Now this takes a little longer to do, but it ends up looking a lot better. So it just depends on how insane you want to go with it. For me, this grille is such an important part of what makes this car look the way that it does that it's worth it to spend the extra time. Okay, let's delete that center line and this one. Get rid of our tools and duplicate this all, move it down. That's looking really nice. Now we can duplicate this across, but we don't need these middle connecting pieces. Let's ungroup and then delete these. We can bring that back, duplicate it, and again, all the way down. Now we can slide that back, duplicate it, all the way down. And we can just delete the extra parts we don't need. Now we can grab all of this. Let's go into edit mode on all of these, make a soft selection, grab this side, and push it in. Let's grab it and group it, move the whole thing back a little bit, go into surface mode, and now we're going to create that inside silver well. Click 3 times in any tight areas. Delete when I run out of room with my arms, because I can just edit it and bring it down. So this needs to be mirrored. Let's connect that, bring this in, and snap these down. I convert to subdivision, so I can add an edge loop, bring this down. And once again, I would love to have the ability to just automatically thicken this. Now, I'm noticing something a little weird here. This is overlapping kind of funny in this area. And this looks pretty much right, but maybe it's a little different than over here. So what's going on? Maybe we got off of our, so I think that's actually just reflection on that side, but somewhere in here, I think we got off our axis a little bit. And so I have a trick for recovering the axis that I can show you. So let's try to identify the culprit. If I select this bottom section here, and then I bake the symmetry, and then delete this side, all I have to do to recover symmetry is turn mirror on again. And it fixed that section for us there. And so that's something that I've run into in Gravity Sketch a few times where I've lost symmetry. Maybe I was working and I just grabbed it and I slightly moved it, didn't even notice. And then it's like, oh man, how am I going to recover that? Because I didn't undo. That's one way to recover it. Okay, so let's grab this section here and thicken it out. We can do so by going into face mode, grabbing everything and extruding. and make it a little, let's see, bigger or smaller? Let's make it smaller. Just push it back on my go. Then we can edit it into place. That gives us the thickness. And then I'll grab the whole thing and push it back along the z-axis. We can edit this, fill it out, so there's no gaps. Okay, so that's chrome. So let's make a new material. That's like a white, shiny material. Actually, we'll make it gray in here, but in when we render this out, it's gonna be white and shiny. Make that other mesh now. I'm just gonna duplicate these, drag them out, duplicate this up, duplicate these across, bring it up, duplicate it, bring it up. That's the right pattern. I'm gonna duplicate that, bring it down, and again. Now we can make the whole thing taller. We don't need these center pieces, and we'll just duplicate these one more time. Probably too many here, that's okay. Grab all of these and make them one group, and then place them in the mesh. Now we can break the group and get rid of any we don't need. All right, now with the surface tool, in a dark mode, let's just create something behind the grill to block the light. Now we're just gonna add a splitter down here. Actually more of just a connected bumper piece, but we could add a splitter if we wanted to. It's gonna be really fun to modify this car once we've got it built. Now I want to create the general surface here, which I can follow when I create my panels on top of it. I'm gonna go into surface mode, make it flat, and put it in point mode, and just start to draw this A-pillar coming all the way back and down the rear of the car. I can convert this to sub D and extrude this down to connect it at the windshield and just push this inside. I'm just extruding and connecting this down the roof line all the way to the end. We can use our lines to line up where this should go. I'm just pulling these edges out, essentially just filling the volumes that were created by the lines. Now we can extrude this all the way down. Then go into edge mode so I can grab this entire line, extrude and connect. I'm going to extrude this door down and this skirt here. That stage floor really helps us understand where the skirt needs to go. And it does go past this right here, so we can add that. And all of these are going to be extruded out to form that fender. Bring this fender up nice and high, and then it's going to sit back in. So we're going to need to add some more edge loops in here to allow it that definition. Bring edge loop all the way down this here, so we can push that down. Okay, now since this is more of a guide, let's put this on our lines layer so it becomes transparent. I'm going to pull this out again, and then just grab it and place it into lines. And now it's more transparent, so we can work on top of that. Now when we create surfaces, we'll be able to see whether it's in front of or behind our guide. Some stuff we'll want to be behind the guide. We'll just make that decision as we go. I'm gonna make this a little darker so it's similar to the lines. Now back on our mesh layer, let's go back to the surface tool and back to the shiny sketch material. Now we can look more closely and create this door. Bringing my orthographic reference back so I can see the specifics. We're going to create the A-pillar right off of that hood line. You can just draw a couple of points and then complete it because we're going to switch it to sub D mode and delete these extra points here so it's easier to edit. We can just drag this up and keeping our guide mesh in mind, put this into position. And we're just doing the door and that ends right about here. Add another edge loop to fill that out. Bring this one over to around where the window line is and then we'll duplicate it by adding an edge loop, extrude the top section across and connect it. Using the top orthographic view to see how far back this roof needs to go. I'll add another edge loop here. Like there's a piece that kind of extends back like that. Now let's go into edge mode, grab this whole edge loop and extrude it down to give it some thickness. Do the same thing with this one here and just clean up the points. Turn the reference off just to kind of see how it's looking. Let's call that roof panel good and add some windows. I'm going to duplicate this while keeping it as close as I can to where it originally was. I usually zoom in, do that, and then I'm going to put it along an axis, duplicate, and move it up. Now in edit mode, I can extrude across and just delete the other stuff, and I'll have a remaining windshield. Connect these back and delete the vertices that were connected to the original roof panel. I can just slide this down along its axes into position. I can move these back into place. Now just due to the complexity and timeline, I've decided that we're going to make these windows extremely tinted and not show the interior. So I don't need to model the inside of this A-pillar and give it thickness. just indicating the thickness is enough. There's our windshield. I'm just going to add an extra edge loop here to help fill in the crack. And now I'm going to go into surface mode, and I'm going to draw on the inside just a line polygons that blocks the light going into the engine bay. Now let's bring our reference back and create a new surface for the door panel. In surface mode, just going to create a small shape, convert it to sub D, and then I can start positioning this how I need. Just going to extrude it down this edge right along the other panel and all the way down here. I'll bring this all the way across to the end of the door. I'm continually referencing the orthographic reference in these images. So if my lines are wrong, I notice that. There's this nice angle coming all the way down from the roof line, so I just want to keep that in mind. I'm seeing that in the orthographic. It's harder to see here, but it's coming down at an angle. And we add some supporting edge loops, line these fenders up, and line these panel gaps up. This design line I connected with this cut in the fender, but actually it needs to go all the way up here. So we'll bring this one up here. And this deep cut here is where the door handle lives. This bows out. And I'm going to turn the reference off, and let's see what it looks like when I crease it. I'm going to go into edit mode, hit the bottom button on the right hand to pull up this menu, grab the crease tool, and then I'm going to crease this line, this line, this line, and this line. It's looking a little funky. Maybe I need to crease it all the way to the end. A little better. And keep following this crease out and see if it looks the way we like. Okay, that's looking pretty sharp. I'm going to go into faces mode and grab a long X, extrude, and pull it out. Extrude again and pull it out a little more. Now we can push that back in. Just tightening things up. Bring this wheel well back and extrude that fender piece we made earlier. And just crease any of the edges that got lost when you did that. On the inside of the wheel well, I'm just going to draw another surface to kind of block the light. Even it out on the bottom so it doesn't look weird in profile. I want to make sure the line across the whole bottom is consistent, so I'm just making a grid line here by turning grid on and then going to stroke mode with point on. I'm just going to draw a perfectly straight line across. I can turn grid mode off and move this into place, and it'll help me line things up for consistency. And based on that, these should be higher. That one little guideline is having a big impact on the look. I'm going to duplicate that and bring it up a little bit and use that to help me create the side skirt. Do that in surface mode. So the side skirt starts about here, and I'm just going to complete that because I want to go into edit mode and just bring that all the way over. Delete this top guide layer, bring this one down so we have it for later if we need. I'm going to convert this to poly, delete the center edge loop, then I can add an additional supporting edge loop to either side, and we know we need this top part here to line up, but it does actually kind of scoop in, so we can add another edge loop, and somewhere around here grab this point and push it in. I'm actually bending this a little bit towards the back wheel, but keeping it lined up with the door. I'm going to edit it, go into face mode, grab the whole thing, and extrude and move along X, giving it extra volume there, and then sliding it in. The side skirt in, let's quickly add a side window. I'll just duplicate the side skirt, bring it up, put it in edit mode, I'm gonna bring these points over, push the whole thing down a little bit and inside, delete the ones we don't need. I'm just gonna grab this edge and extrude it up, pull this inside, delete any extra polygons, and add an extra edge loop where necessary to just fill this out. If you're wondering why I use the same geometry as the side skirt, there was absolutely no reason. I just wanted to show that it's easy to just grab and reuse stuff, but you could definitely have just made a new surface there. That side window in place, we can add this little embellishment here. Just line that up with the angle that we were establishing for the door line. Looks like that same trim is continuing on the top here. We can just duplicate and drag it down to the end of the door line. I'm just drawing a triangular piece here. Edit it, go sub D. Let's just simplify this. Add supporting edge loops where needed. Triangle looks like it should be pretty vertical on the right side. I want to build this scoop out as its own piece. I'm going to start here. Just use surface tool to create it. And I can just loop that. I'm going to go edit and loop. Just delete any unnecessary points. Now we're going to change this to sub D and further refine it. I'm going to bring this in front of the other one so it's overlapping. Now we can fill the back. And this hood scoop will just have a little thickness coming in to overlap with the door here. Let's give this scoop some thickness around the outside and all the way around the front. Takes a little time, but adding that thickness to this really makes the whole piece look a lot more solid, literally. And that adds a lot to the feel of the final model. Now we'll make the scoop for the area that's at the back of the window. And creating this is making me realize we should adjust the top here and give that an extra edge loop so we have a shelf to connect the scoop to. And same thing on the bottom. Let's just pull this out. I'm going to convert the scoop to sub D and add additional edge loops where needed. I'll connect the backside, smooth it out, and line this up with the reference. Let's make it easier than last time and extrude inward on this one. I'm going to go into edit mode, grab the whole edge loop, extrude that, make it smaller, and then extrude that again to hold the volume, pushing it back a little bit, and then extrude it and make it smaller and push it deep inside the scoop. Let's just clean up these areas where the overlap is weird and just tighten it up. I'm going to bring back on my reference with that mesh that we created earlier and use that to help understand where we should put this pretty large rear panel here. It contains the fender. It does have a split, you can see in the reference, so the upper above the scoop here, below the scoop, all the way up over the wheel back here, and then I'm assuming it'll stop along this roof line here. You can see that in this image, so I'll bring that up. For this one, we'll just make a small piece, convert it to sub D, and get rid of the points, and then just start laying this in. Bring this down kind of enough to define the tail area. I know where that needs to go. And I'm starting to rough in where this fin goes, but I'm not going to try to get it perfect yet. What I do want to get right is this fender line. And there's this nice angle that comes up here in the design. Definitely want to add an additional edge loop to capture that. And we're just coming to the top here where we would split the fender and connect with this scoop. To reinforce that line over the kind of hip there, going to add an edge loop, and then we can smooth these out coming down, and then just push that into the scoop. We can extrude this down, connect it, and then add a supporting edge loop. Let's just clean that up. So we put these together here, the sharper that line will be. And in the reference, you can see that it kind of expands out, comes out here over the top of the tail. And I'm just connecting that tail down, and I can look across to the backside behind here at the reference. Over here, it looks like this angle should come around and meet this edge. This edge here becomes a lip and makes for a spoiler that's built into the body. And then there's that additional spoiler on the outside. I can bring this down to this edge here, just extrude these out and connect it and end that there. And then this will make for the top edge of that fender. This line I want to continue into the bumper, so I'm just going to extend that down and then connect this to it. There's a split in this body panel right about here, but I'm still going to bring this down. I'll just create the split later, adding an edge loop here so I can extrude this down. I'd like for the edge loop that comes from the outside rim of the fender line to go all the way around. And so I'm going to extrude from here to create a ring. Just bring that around. Adding additional edge loops will sharpen that up. I want to further sharpen this one the same way. That shows you two different strategies. I use creasing on the other side for one effect, and in this case I used edge loops instead. And it gives you a smoother look, and I think it gives you a little more control than creasing, but you end up with more polygon. If you want, you could export a low poly control mesh from here and do your creasing somewhere else, like in Blender. That way you'd be keeping things really low poly, but still get the creasing. And then you can get the ideas about how you should crease it and set up your edge loops ahead of time in here. Adding more edge loops along here to make it a sharper crease as well. And then I'll just grab this, extrude, and bring it across to indicate where that butt is. Like this scoop needs to go much further back. Since we built it separately and didn't model it into the polygons of the rest of the body, it's much easier to adjust it. Now let's go into the surface tool and create these window spoilers. Sure it's mirrored. Curl this down, and we'll just keep that as a flat polygon. And we'll add an additional one here. Snap it in the center. And I'm going to make this one longer also. Now we can bring this across and just adjust it down. Add another edge loop. And for that window, we'll just bring another surface across, mirror it, and snap, kind of push it into place. There's some cool vents on here, so I'm just creating some more surfaces that I will snap and kind of even out. Then we can duplicate the surface a bunch, so let's make it look good. Kind of even these points out. We get this consistent little shape we can move around. The first thing I'll do is duplicate it on Z, then I can just adjust it into place. Then we can duplicate it again, turn grid mode on, and rotate it 90 degrees. And now I can twist these and snap them so it's making a straight line. Turn grid mode off. I'm going to convert this to sub D so I can simplify it by deleting some points. Bring all these close together. I'm just adding an edge loop on either side. This will be our engine vent piece. Now when I grab this and then I extrude it along X, Once I pick the first one, I can just hold it down and repeat that action all the way down. Then I'll just move the window out of the way. You can see them. And keep repeating that. Do it once more. And there's going to be 4 that are extra big. Bring that glass right up to the edge of this, actually, and duplicate it, push it down. We'll add that, pull that behind. I'm going to go into stroke, point mode, and just create these 4 major pieces that come through. And between each one, create some minor pieces. Really just need to make one and then duplicate it a few times. Now let's add in that line that comes across here. In this case, I'm going to show a new tool. So I'm going to go into this mode and then grab the cut tool and cut from here all the way across, create some new topology, and then I'll do it again, just right next to it. I can put these closer together, and it gives me a place now where I can add an edge loop. So I'll just do that. I'll add an edge loop between these. Then I can go to edge mode, grab that, and pull it in. And we've created a seam that way. Now I can just push these together. Then I'll just crease it, making sure to get only the things I need to crease. That way we get a real tight seam coming down. Just make sure we didn't mess up our fender line too much, because that will affect the roundness. I don't want to just see the whole rest of the body shape, so I'm just going to connect these out. Learned something new, which is that if you're extruding something and you click the trigger, you don't have to let go of the grip trigger. You can just keep clicking it as you go over each point and rapidly connect a section. That definitely speeds that up a lot compared to how I was doing it, which is I was grabbing, letting go, and clicking again each time. So that's pretty cool. All sections connected up, and I'm just kind of exposing that spoiler that's built into the body. And I'm going to crease the top edge of it. Extrude this bottom section down and across. And suddenly I'm much faster at this now that I know that new trick. Repeatedly tapping the right trigger while you're holding down a grip trigger. Add an edge loop, and let's just delete a bunch of verts. Place this up around here, add a crease. Bring this a little higher up. We got a lot of points close together here, so holding right on the stick puts them further apart along the span, and that'll help me fix some of that wonkiness. We'll bring this bottom part up, and there's way too many edge loops here, so I'm going to go into edge mode, start deleting edge loops. Nothing we can do about the ones up here, but these ones down here we can get rid of. We go into faces mode and push this area in, we extrude it, and add another edge loop. Here and here. And around the backside, we'll just soften it out with smooth mode down on the analog stick while grabbing it, pulling these closer. With that well carved out, we can just define another edge loop here, show that there's kind of a sharp point above it. And in loop mode, let's grab both of these, hold them forward next to each other. Let's add a third one right between. And we can just go over to the front of the car, get inside here. Oh, these aren't grouped anymore, so we need to group these. Let's grab them and group, and each time we grab more and group, it'll add to that group. You make a group over here and a group over here, and then you grab both of them and group those. It'll just make one group. Pretty intuitive. Gonna make a duplicate of that, drag it up, bring it to the back side of the car, and pop it in here and ungroup it, get rid of the ones we don't need. I'm going to go into edge mode, grab this entire edge and extrude it again and back. I'm just going to grab everything, grab all these guys actually, grab these and group them. I'm going to take a flat square stroke and drag it across from here to here. Delete the extra points, point it the way that I want to point it, and make it thicker. I'll just duplicate that, put it over here, pull it down, hit it again. Make these ones rounded, add an extra point. And then I'm just going to do an outer edge with this tool. Come across here, blend it in the middle, and then we can grab that, edit it, and loop it. Add extra points where you need to. Put it nicely into place. We can tilt this around with the angles, and then we'll add thickness to it. Bring this mesh all the way up here. This one too. And then let's go into surface and just draw a line across to cover that. We got a hole in our mesh, so I'm going to break the group, just duplicate this, just put it right there. It looks like there's another one of these back here, and the mesh is covered on this side. Finally, there's kind of an opening here that we can do with the stroke tool again. Group it, just everything to point out. And again, I'll increase the thickness. Just push it back. You know, inside the light, there is a shape that comes down here, across, and up. We can edit that, grab these, and make them bigger. And then there's a point that comes up this way as well, and we can make this smaller. Then across each of these, there's a bulb. I'm just going to do a repeating shape like that, and then draw around them. Just duplicate that. And in surface mode, I'm going to make a backing. Sure it fills. A couple more supporting lines with the stroke tool. I'm adjusting to the overall shape. And now I'm just going to go into surface, covering, convert that to sub D, and adjust it into place. We can go into layers, grab this covering, and put it in glass. We've got some transparency there. This part here with 3 lines up close to each other is actually the perfect place to do a panel gap. We'll do it the easy way, which is just by pushing them close together and then dropping the center one down. This should actually go closer over here. And somewhere over here it cuts in more. So we could just add an extra edge loop there and then push it in. Add an extra edge loop on either side. Okay, now let's delete these verts here so we can extrude the ones underneath.
If you made it this far, this is where I get a new voice setup. And for the rest of it, I'm actually going to be doing voiceover because my mic stopped working in the video. We're almost done, and we're going to bring this into Blender soon and render it out. And at this point, I'm moving pretty quickly, just trying to finish up the rear. I've taken the mesh from up above and moved it down, so I have that same repeating pattern. And then I'm adding some trim for the outside of the diffuser. Mirrored, I just snap it in the center there, and that trim gave me a better idea of where I needed to put the body, so I scooched the body over. Now using the stroke tool again, I'm just adding those dividing lines for the diffuser and changing the angle of that line so it's consistent across, and doing the same thing for the interior dividing sections. Anywhere it snaps in the middle, I just go into edit mode and snap that point across. Now I switch over to the surface tool again, and I'm filling in the back. So you can see that I'm just kind of repeating the same process. Now, rather than creating a whole subdivision surface to have that diffuser push back with coherent geometry, what I did is I just took the stroke and had that represent, the edge of each of those planes. And then I put the surface tool running right up inside of that stroke. And so then if I export it with double-sided faces, it kind of looks like it's a completed surface, even though it's really just a flat plane. And so again, I'm at the end of this model. I'm wanting to just finish it up. And so that's a faster way for me to just create those surfaces and have them look okay. Now with everything adjusted there, I actually skipped a section where I went into the environment area, and then I just adjusted that to be a studio environment. And you can see how the reflections are just totally different now. It's much easier to see how these faces turn and the surfaces turn on the model. And now I'm just going through and grabbing each individual section and coloring it to be red. And then I realized that I didn't make a side view mirror. So I'm just quickly creating a primitive, putting it in sub-D mode, and deleting that center face so I have the cylinder shape I want. And then I'm adding a couple of edge loops to fill out the sides of that. And with another additional subdivision shape, I'm making a hemispherical shape. And I do that by creating a spherical subdivision primitive and just deleting half of it. Now I'm going into soft select mode and just grabbing the points of that and moving it around to get that side view mirror shape that I'm looking for. Now on the other side of that, in edge select mode, I grab the whole edge loop and just extrude that and scale it down a little bit and move that forward and out, and then make a few additional adjustments. I'm deleting the extra points that I don't need here, so I have that lip just sort of coming inside because that's all I need. And I'm going to create an additional plane for that mirror, so I just have to have that sort of pushing in there, and I don't need to really complete the whole surface on the inside. So here I am connecting those points for the mirror, and as I bring that surface out, which is a new duplicated surface, you can see that it just kind of fits right inside the original one. And then when I switch that to white, I'll make that a white chrome reflective surface once I'm in Blender. Now I'm just looking through my layers, kind of organizing things. I saved this file with all my layers in it, including the reference images, and then I create a new file, and I name that file export, because I'm going to save that off with all my layers deleted except for the one with the geometry. So I'm just doing that one by one right now, and we'll hop into Blender.
Inside Blender, we're going to import an OBJ, navigate to where you stored it. By default, it looks like it's really large in the scene. Let's open up the transform, make it 0.01 on all 3 axes. There's our car. I've noticed the colors tend to come in pretty washed out. So you can correct that in the materials. Make the red more saturated. If we go into Eevee, you get a better look at where it's going. Going through each material slot and making adjustments to it, figuring out which one's which as I go. It looks pretty good with dark wheels. And let's make an alpha blend material for the glass. Definitely looking better with some materials on it. Let's get rid of this default light and cube. I happen to have a plugin called Hdri Maker, which allows you to easily place your HDRIs in the scene. And it allows you to create a ground plane out of that HDRI and add that. Put this car on a road. So it's kind of floating in the scene right now, and we can generate a ground plane. Okay, so throw it onto an HDRI with a floor, throw on some bloom, ambient occlusion, create an empty, hook up our camera to our current view. And with the empty in the scene, we can make that our focus object for depth of field, and make that depth of field something like 0.5. Like 0.03 works okay. I'm going to switch over to cycles so it'll look a little nicer. Cranking up the focal length to really flatten it out. Do a square render.
And this is where I just hit render and you get the final image for Instagram. And here's the post on Instagram. So this was just a really quick end-to-end car creation and also an extremely quick render. You could do a lot more to make the render look better, but there's plenty of tutorials for how to use Blender, and I recommend Blender as it's open source and anyone can use it for free. So yeah, thanks for checking this out. I'm going to continue to up-level the YouTube channel and get new equipment, try out lots of new things. I have all the latest VR equipment, and I'm going to do more tutorials on how to be creative using these tools together. So let me know if you have any questions. I'm finishing up a video right now on how to use Spark AR Studio along with Gravity Sketch to make a selfie filter for Instagram with VR. So that'll be the next one I post. But yeah, subscribe if you're into this kind of content, and thanks for checking it out if you made it this far.